while you have time, because once you get older, once you get, not even more successful, once you start needing more money, you're going to have less and less time to do it. While you can, learn all of the things that you possibly can about filmmaking. Buying photography books helped my filmmaking because a lot of new filmmakers ignore the fact that filmmaking is inherently a visual art form. You can take all of the dialogue out of filmmaking and it will still work as an art form. But if you take away the visuals, then it completely changes into something different, right?
Right.
So everybody needs to know how to tell a story visually. And the thing that great photographers do, and in particular street photographers, what they do is they tell a story visually with one image. So if you can figure out how to tell a story with one image, then you won. You
24
understand.
per second is going
Right,
to be easier.
it's going to be so much easier. So like picking up photography books, probably the most famous photographer ever is Annie Leibovitz, and she has a very interesting journey from being a rock and roll photographer to being a more documentary style photographer to being a more celebrity portrait style photographer. But one thing that I appreciate in a lot of her work, looking through some of her books throughout the years, is that even with some of the more portrait style celebrity photography, she found a way to tell stories with it, So like really looking into photography books and trying to figure out how to be a visual storyteller, how, putting the camera in one spot will feel different than putting the camera in another spot, or, using the light to frame somebody's face in a certain way, or, all of that is like the basis of filmmaking, how can I, it's a language without words. Even though there are words in cinema, it doesn't have to be.
Right. And, obviously Alfred Hitchcock would agree with you because he says the same thing about if, you should be able to understand what's going on even if the audio cut out. Right. You should have a good idea if it's a good film.
And Steven Soderbergh recently, I don't know if it was recent, but I saw Steven Soderbergh often does this thing where he will re-edit people's films, and he did a re-edit of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he made it all black and white, and he took the dialogue out, and it still works.
Why have I never seen that? See,
it's on his website.
This is what we gotta do this more. See, I'm gonna watch that immediately.
It's on his website.
Okay, so then you like learning from different mediums, but you also like learning from different filmmakers, which makes me want to ask then, if you had a dinner and you could invite 3 filmmakers, living or dead, to that dinner, just to chop it up with, who would they be?
Fritz Lang would definitely be one. Fritz Lang, for those of you who don't know, he was a giant in silent era, and then he made the transition to sound films very well. Silent era, he made films like Metropolis.
Which is amazing. Yeah, inspired so many films. Yeah.
Great early sci-fi film, and then sound era, his first talking picture is one of my favorite movies ever, which is a film called M, and he uses silence louder than words to help assist the story that's being told, which is amazing to me because a lot of filmmakers don't know how to use silence.
You did a video essay on that, right?
I did do a video essay on that.
Yeah, it blew my mind.
Yeah. So Fritz Lang would be one of them. Paul Thomas Anderson, because I think Paul has a very interesting, unique way of looking at pictures. But more importantly, he has an interesting way of looking at writing. And I feel like if 9 times out of 10, if the writing is good, the movie will be good.
That makes sense.
It's very hard to mess up a good script.
Like Aaron Sorkin. That's why he's so valuable.
Exactly. And every time I've heard Paul Thomas Anderson talk about writing, it just sounds so in-depth and so unique and so interesting on how he writes and his ideas behind writing and everything like that. And
that's why his movies are so good.
Exactly.
Okay, so Fritz Lang, Paul Thomas Anderson. You're gonna get crazy. You're gonna get somebody a party starter.
You guys are gonna be mad at this. I would say Woody Allen.
See, the thing is, which leads me to my next question. Woody Allen has some of my favorite movies of all time, and
Mine too.
Also done, like, I love Midnight in Paris, and I love Vicky Cristina Barcelona, and so many of those films. But you did a video essay on this also,
Yeah.
of art and the artist,
Yeah, separating
and
art from the
of
artist, yeah.
acts of a person versus creations of a person.
Right.
And what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a thing that I think is a deep question that most people haven't dived into.
So here's the thing. I first off, let me preface this by saying I totally understand if you cannot separate the art from the artist. This is not me saying that you have to separate the art from the artist. Mm-hmm. But I feel that once an artist releases their art to the world, it no longer belongs to them. Not in the sense of ownership legally or, copyright, whatever, but it becomes a part of the people that are consuming that art,
The culture, the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
the viewer is almost
Right.
part of any artwork.
The way I frame it is, and I'm going to use another controversial figure. R. Kelly had songs that were the soundtrack to my childhood. Before I had heard any of the things that he had done, those songs were a part of my childhood. Mm-hmm. Now, do I automatically throw those songs out? Because those songs to me had nothing to do with him as a person. Those songs are memories of me. I remember "Step in the Name of Love." I was in probably like the second or third grade or something like that, and the girl I had a crush on was singing that song and dancing to it on the playground. And I was like, "Oh, Step in the Name of Love. Let me figure out what that song is." And then I listened to it, and I was like, "Oh, this is dope." And it reminded me of that girl.
Right.
Doesn't remind me of R. Kelly. They're the same thing with Woody Allen movies. Woody Allen, I grew up on like the raunchy comedies of the early 2000s, mm-hmm. which are, some of them are great, some of them suck. I stand by saying Superbad is the greatest comedy of all time.
Thank you. Superbad is the greatest comedy of all time. And I don't care if anyone disagrees.
I don't give a shit if you disagree. Yeah. Superbad is the greatest comedy of all time. Totally I will 1000% die on that hill.
I will too. I'm right there with you.
But when I didn't discover Woody Allen movies until I was like 18, 19 years old. And I think the first one I saw was Annie Hall. And it was...
That's a great one for your first one to see. First one, yeah, that's crazy.
It's so crazy because Woody Allen's films were funny, but not in the same way that the raunchy comedies were.
They were wit.
They were wit. It was intelligent humor, mm-hmm. and I had never seen that before.
Because it's not something you usually see on TV.
Exactly.
It's kind of new in a lot of popular culture.
Exactly,
actually.
And it changed my entire way of thinking about movies. So a lot of the filmmakers I love are filmmakers that changed the way I think about movies, the way I feel about how they were made, about how they affected me, how they made me feel. Mm-hmm. It just changed something, and Woody Allen did that for me first with Annie Hall, and then I think the next one I saw was Hannah and Her Sisters. And then I just like consumed as many. I haven't watched all of Woody Allen's films because this motherfucker has put out a film a year for like 50 years. I don't got time to watch all of your goddamn movies. But I've seen probably like 3/4 of his movies.
Yeah.
And it's a different type of comedy that I hadn't been exposed to. And I remember that time period in my life and how I was like a sponge soaking up so much cinema, trying to learn everything I can, trying to consume everything I can. And his films were some of the films that stood out for me. So it really changed my perception of things. And I think, the amount of himself that he put into those films, like he plays the same character basically in every film of his, And
he writes a lot of himself into other characters.
A lot of his paranoia, a lot of his thoughts on religion, a lot of his thoughts on a lot of things, and it showed me that I can put pieces of myself into movies, and it may not be 100% accurate, or it may be an exaggerated version of whatever I feel or think or whatever, but I can put myself into that, and it
and makes everything you make better as a result.
Exactly. It's just Woody Allen's movies have a very special place in my heart, and I personally can separate that because I don't know who Woody Allen is. I didn't know anything about Woody Allen as a person. Mm-hmm. When I first started watching those movies, that like all of the things that he's been accused of have absolutely no impact on the way I saw those movies for the first time.
Right.
And I can separate the fact that he is accused of things and separate the fact from that and the fact that I love these movies, because I wasn't thinking about him as a person when I was watching these movies.
Yeah.
I was lost in the worlds that he created.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not going to let a person doing something stupid, whether or being accused of something stupid or whatever, if they do it or not, if they're accused of it or not, I'm not going to let somebody doing something stupid ruin my emotions that I have built towards a thing.
If you did that, you wouldn't watch any movies.
You wouldn't watch any movies.
Because we all do
listen to
stupid
any
things.
music. You wouldn't consume any art in general. A lot of people, there are things that you don't know about your favorite artists, which are pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
And then they come into light. There's a lot of things about Renaissance painters and classical musicians that are fucked up things that they did. Does that mean we stop consuming their work?
I mean, even more, think about all the things that people do wrong that you don't know about and you will never know about.
And you'll never know about.
It's like, does that mean you're wrong the entire time that you're enjoying some work that they made as a byproduct? It's a byproduct of the person. It's not the person.
It's not the person.
Yeah.
It is not the person. That's like saying, that my movies are me. They're not me. They're a piece of me. They're a piece of the thoughts and feelings that I have and have had, but that doesn't mean that they are 1000% me.
Yeah, they may even be some of the best pieces of you.
They may be the best, and that's probably what it is, because people tend to present the best pieces of themselves to the world.
Yeah.
That's just what nobody sees what you see behind closed doors. Nobody sees the secretive things, So I personally can separate the art from the artist, and because Woody Allen had such an impact on me as a filmmaker and on my emotions at the time, I was in a really bad area in my life at that time. And those movies picked me up and not only made me laugh, but made me think at the same time.
Which is that's what, when you get in the higher levels of comedy.
Right.
Comedy kind of has these layers. It's like slapstick, and then it's sort of like sarcasm, and then wit. And then you get in these higher and higher levels. And when you can incorporate more of those levels to a higher degree, like the best comedians like Dave Chappelle, he can make you laugh and make you think. And so it adds another dimension to how good it is.
Exactly.
And there's very few filmmakers who do that, because comedies are kind of known for being a lesser
comedies
genre.
Are the lesser genre in cinema, not in actuality, because I think comedy is essential to cinema, and I think a lot of great films. I could make the argument that every single one of Quentin Tarantino's films are a comedy.
Yeah, it's a heist / comedy, or a revenge film / comedy.
Right.
And I mean, Quentin Tarantino has a huge comedy influence. I would say David Fincher, he has some super dark movies, but there's comedy in his. Of course, the Coens, who are considered some of the best, have comedy. Spielberg has comedy in a lot of his, and he does a lot of comedies. And then Wes Anderson, who's one of my favorite, does comedies. And so, you're right.
I don't want to watch a movie without having a couple of moments where I'm like,
with some levity,
Exactly. I don't care how dark the subject matter is. I think you can laugh about everything.
Yeah, even the most dark movies, Mad Max Fury Road, has moments of levity in it.
You got to. You can go really, really dark and have super depressing subject matter and still have moments where, it's just...
it's like using silence.
Right.
You can't just have all loud music and talking.
Right.
You use silence also. Comedy's the exact same thing.
1000%. That's how I feel about comedy. I want every movie to have a little bit of comedy in appropriate places. Obviously I don't want a movie about somebody dying of cancer to be I'm sure somebody can make a funny comedy. Actually,
there are
50-50.
Yeah.
50-50.
With another Seth Rogen.
50-50 was a funny movie about
cancer.
Right.
And it's actually kind of, when I think about movies and cancer, it's the first one that comes to mind. So it's imagine how many people that helped in even a slight way.
Right.
And it's comedy.
That is true. Okay, not cancer. I don't want to see a movie about a child molester and it be a comedy.
Yeah.
That'd be a weird one to make a full-fledged comedy, but
But people take even the worst subjects, like Hitler. There's a comedy by Taika Waititi. Didn't he do one?
Jojo Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, exactly.
And there's another one which isn't about Hitler, but about it's about concentration camps. But it's another comedy. I can't think of the name of the film right now.
Sometimes comedy is the best way to open your mind to something, so you can get something more important through.
Yeah.
That's what great stand-up comedians do.
It lowers the inhibitions of people. It lowers their defenses. And then you can sneak
in something that makes them think, right?
Exactly.
So it makes people more open-minded than their normal state, so you can get other things in. And it's not a requirement of comedy, but I think the best comedies do that. The Woody Allen comedies, Wes Anderson comedies, even Coen Brothers comedies, you know, they sort of lower that guard.
The darkest Coen films have funny moments in it.
Yeah,
No Country for Old Men has funny moments in it.
One of my favorite movies ever. And
like,
you need that. It's just like the silence before something intense happens. They do that probably better than anyone.
Yeah.
And comedy works in the exact same way.
Yeah.
So then if those are some of the filmmakers who have the most impact on you that you want to get for, then what is the single film that you think is like your favorite or the one that had the most impact on you?
I don't have a favorite, but the two films that I always go to as having the biggest impact on me are three films really, but two films that I shouldn't have been watching, one film that, you know, everybody was watching. It's Silence of the Lambs, and I saw these films all within like a month period when I was like 5 or something like that. Silence of the Lambs.
God.
Silence of the Lambs, Saving Private Ryan, and Space Jam. I saw them all when I was a kid. I swear to God, they were all within a month of each other. I have an obsession with Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny is my hero. I want to be Bugs Bunny when I grow up. God damn it. Bugs Bunny is great. So that's Space Jam. And I love basketball, Michael Jordan. You know, everything's...
Yeah, it's all your favorite things put together.
Space Jam is obvious for when I was, you know, a 5-year-old watching those movies.
R. Kelly song.
Yeah, okay.
It all comes back around.
It all makes perfect sense. But no, I Believe I Can Fly was a slapper. I mean, that was a huge part of my childhood.
Yeah.
But no, that makes sense. But Silence of the Lambs, I remember my aunt in her basement had the VHS tape, and it had the poster of
Hannibal Lecter?
No. It was Jodie Foster, and it had a butterfly
over her mouth, right?
And I was like, "What is that? That's an interesting looking image." So one day, my mom has worked at night my entire life. So one day, I just put it in and watched it, and I was like, "This is so cool. This is the most amazing."
Dang! When you were that little, you were like a little kid watching Silence of the Lambs, and you watched the whole thing, and you were totally into it.
I was totally into it.
Damn! You were destined to be a filmmaker, because I don't know many 5-year-olds watching Silence of the Lambs voluntarily.
I know. And then Saving Private Ryan, I watched because my godmother, I told her, and I did want to be a filmmaker back then. I didn't know what a filmmaker was, but I told her I wanted to make movies and I wanted to write them. And she said, "Oh, you want to be a Steven Spielberg?" I was like, "Okay."
Damn.
And then I asked my aunt, same aunt, who Steven Spielberg was, and she told me some movies that he made, and she was like, "I think I have one of his movies downstairs," and it was Saving Private Ryan on VHS.
She didn't have you like watch like E.T. or Jurassic Park or
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan, the most intense war movie ever.
And I thought the opening battle sequence was like the coolest thing ever.
For sure.
For a 5-year-old, you know, you
still to this day, that's probably the most amazing war scene ever.
That's
filmed.
one of the most amazing achievements in cinema ever.
Definitely.
Like nothing, no war movie, no war scene has matched it before or since. It's incredible. But I saw it and I was like, this is cool. And I actually didn't make it all the way through Saving Private Ryan because that's a long ass movie.
Yeah.
And then the name Steven Spielberg stuck in my head.
Wow.
And then I watched it like 10 years later and I thought, oh, I was right. This is an amazing movie.
Dang.
I want to talk to you for a second. Because one of the things that I hear the most about these podcasts and the videos that I put up online is that I have a nice voice. To which I say, I do. I even had one person once leave a comment asking me if I do any voiceover work. And unfortunately for you, I don't. But fortunately for you, our sponsor for this episode does. And that sponsor is Voice123. Now, for all of you disappointed that I don't personally do voiceover work, Voice123 has a large database of people that do. And it's really simple to use. You just go to voice123.com and browse their library of voice performers. And you can even listen to samples of the voices so you can make sure you're getting exactly what you're looking for. Now, they have voices from all around the world, and once you find them, all you have to do is contact them and then pay. It's really that simple. So, no, you can't have my voice, but you can have many, many more with Voice123. Some would even say better. I mean, some would say. So head on over to voice123.com to step up the quality of the voiceover work in your videos, your films, your advertisement, and whatever else you could possibly need voiceover work for. Again, that's voice123.com. And now that that's out of the way,
how do you see yourself, like future DiAnte, like 10 years from now, if you could be doing whatever you want? Do you see yourself doing feature-length films? Do you see? Yeah. Because is that always been the goal, right?
Yes. But I also have a serious love for short films. My goal is to, if I'm releasing feature film, to release a short film before it comes out, every single time. I would love to release this. I think short films, I've shot 4 features, and before 3 of those 4 features, I shot a short film right before them.
Wow.
Almost like as a tune-up type of thing, to get me, right.
It's like a warm-up fight.
Yeah, it's like a warm-up fight, just like before I run the marathon, I gotta stretch a little bit,
Yeah.
We talked about in the other podcast, I ain't running no goddamn marathon.
I know.
but no, I love short form. There are ideas that pop in my head that are short form, and there are ideas that pop in my head that are long form.
Because they're not the same. There's tons of stuff that would never work as a feature film, but would be perfect for a short, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? Like some things that are too big to tackle in short form.
And I think I write different when I'm writing for short films versus feature films. It's just it's a different thing.
Yeah. It's like if you had to tell a great story in a paragraph, or you had a novel, you're obviously not going to write them the same way.
Exactly. I like to think of it as like Lil Wayne. In the early 2000s, you had album Lil Wayne versus mixtape Lil Wayne. It's very different. Completely same artist, very different.
Right.
That's how I see shorts and features for me. But yeah, the goal is to. I mean, I've made features, but the goal is to continue to make features and continue to make shorts and do it at higher and higher levels and everything like that. I love features. I love shorts. I also want to write novels and make animated films and make animated television shows and
just do everything. There's no reason to put a cap on it.
Exactly. I have any kind of thing that you can watch, I would love to try.
Yeah. Do you have a dream project, even if it's one you can't go into detail about what it is? Do you have a dream project, like your Inception, like where Christopher Nolan had been working on that for like decades, since he was a kid in school?
I have a couple of films a couple of features that I've been writing for years, or that it took me years to write. I've finished 2 or 3 of them now, but I keep going back to them, rewriting them. But
do you have one in particular where if you had like endless budget and time right now and they green lighted, do you have one you would do now?
Definitely.
That's not for strategic reasons, just because you always wanted to make it?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And I started writing it when I was like 17. And
wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's evolved much, your idea of it, since then, or do you feel like it's just? Yeah?
It evolved in both technical ways and emotional ways. More has happened to me since then, so I could put more emotionally into the screenplay. But
what's your favorite aspect of the filmmaking process then? Is it the writing, or are you like do you like being behind the camera? Do you like production or post-production, or obviously probably not pre-production because you don't seem like entirely because of the logistics involved, but maybe just the writing aspects or the ideation? Do you have a favorite part of filmmaking?
My favorite part of filmmaking is always the part that I'm in at the moment. But if I took a step away from it and I was not doing anything at the time, like if I was on vacation, not making a movie, writing would be the thing that I would long for the most. I love to write. Writing is, because there's no rules, there's no restraints, there's just imagination. I don't have to think about the camera can't physically fit in this spot, or it can't move in that way, or the pacing of this scene has to be a certain way, or I don't have to think about that. I just write, and the way I write is very sloppy. My first drafts are very sloppy. Are
you a stream of consciousness style writer?
Stream of consciousness style writer. But
that's cool. See, I don't write that way, but I always found that so smart because you don't miss anything. Anything you have gets on the page.
Everything.
You're just editing.
Yeah, that's what I prefer. I'm a way better editor of myself than a writer, I think.
Which I think is more valuable.
Right.
Because I had the opposite problem where I was like, I don't know, I would write in a direction and then I didn't have it fully figured out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got like a masterclass from James Patterson that it totally changed my writing, and I got really serious on outlining, and now I'm like an outlining fiend.
I don't want to know what happens. I don't want to know.
You write it and discover what happens.
Right.
Which is
yeah.
kind of closer to the experience the audience
I'm
right?
my first audience member. I don't want to know what happens. But here's the thing: there are only a few things that can logically happen. The characters are the story. That's what's driving the story forward. And there are only a few ways, really one way, that each of the character is going to react to whatever is happening.
As long as you know the characters.
As long as you know the character. So you start when I'm going stream of consciousness, I'm discovering the characters rather than trying to fit them into this mold of this is what the story is. So let me fit you into this and write a character that specifically would do this thing.
Oh, right.
I'm discovering the character. So sometimes they take me in a direction that the story. A story direction that I had no idea that we were going. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it'll take me down a path, and I'll keep pulling at that string and discover something completely new that I had never even thought of because they only reacted the way that they can react. You know?
Right. Is that, so your approach to filmmaking, like on set, because of all the constraints of filmmaking, does that change how you are with planning and things like that because of the logistical things involved with production versus writing?
I like to have controlled organicness
like a controlled discovery,
right?
Where it's like you plan out as many boundaries as you can to allow you to discover as much as you can, rather than removing all possible organic things you could discover.
When I'm working with actors, I'll tell them they'll have an idea, and I was like, it'll be completely different from my idea. I'm like, I don't know. Let's see what that does. Let's just go with it. Let's see how that works. You know, I don't want to know. I don't storyboard. I don't shot list. A lot of cinematographers get mad at me that I've worked with before, which is why I do a lot of my own cinematography now.
Plus, you're a great cinematographer, so that makes that easy.
Thank you. They get mad at me because I won't do that, and I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want the idea that I have 2 months before we shoot. Outside of the space, like I'm sitting in a completely different space, not working with the actors, not seeing how they're going to move, not seeing how the lighting is working at the time. It's going to be completely different than when I'm on set, And then
so
a lot.
You like that organic.
I like that organic discovery.
Surprises that might be better than anything you could have planned for.
Right, and there are some things that I will plan for. There are some things that are just like logistically complicated. There are some sequences that I have very clear in my mind that you have to plan for. You have to have a shot list. You have to, communicate it because you may need special equipment or special lighting or whatever. There are those things that you have to account for. But for me, most of the movie I'm discovering on set. I'm discovering. Like I know the story. This is my prep. You work with the actors as much as possible. You talk about the characters. You talk about what's going on. You talk about how you can approach a scene and everything like that. I learn the story. Even though I wrote the story, I still have to learn the story. Even though you write a story, doesn't mean you know the story. You still have to discover everything that there is to possibly know about the story. So that's my creative prep. Technical prep, I want to know everything that's going on with lighting. I want to know where the lighting is. I want to know how it's working so that when I get on set, I'm not surprised. I want to test everything. I want to test every lens that I use. I want to test the cameras. If I'm using, a dolly, I want to test it to see if the movement feels like the mood of the story, just so I can know. And I may not use that dolly on the day of. But I know how that dolly is going to move if I push in on a character with this dolly at this speed versus me coming in with a gimbal or a Steadicam at a certain speed. Like it's going to feel completely different, and I'll know which one that feels like. I'll know what a lens will feel like, not just focal length. A lot of filmmakers' knowledge of lenses end at focal length, like the size of the frame. That's great to know, but I also know that this lens is a little bit softer here. It'll fall, the roll off will feel this way.
It'll be more gradual.
It'll be more gradual.
More sharp at the edges.
It's more sharp in the middle, or if it's softer all around, or if it's more contrasty. If it's less contrasty, I will know that beforehand so that I know in the moment, okay, this needs to feel like this, and this lens with this, this dolly move will make it feel like this.
Right. So you like the control to allow for the organic stuff.
Right. I like to know everything that can possibly accept the shots. And it's the same thing with my writing. I want to know the characters, not the story. The story will reveal itself to me based on the characters.
So you're like a jazz player. Jazz players don't learn jazz on stage.
Right.
They learn jazz off stage.
Right.
Right. But when they get on stage, they can improvise.
Exactly.
And you want to be able to improvise by having the 10,000 hours of practice and knowledge, so that you're not going to go up there and you don't know anything.
Right. Exactly. And then when I get on set, I will have a rehearsal beforehand. A lot of people, crew comes on set first. Actors come on set first for me, because I want to walk through the space with them, see how they feel, see what the blocking is. I don't want to force blocking on them. If they feel, I'll let them run the scene, whatever movement they feel natural. If I need them to be in a certain place, I'll tell them they have to be there. Just find a way to get there, whatever. And then from there, I'll discover what the shots have to be.
Yeah.
What the actual visual storytelling has to be.
Do you feel like, because you've done literally every single role on a film set, that gives you a unique view of filmmaking that many directors or cinematographers or any role you're in currently is totally different for you than it would be for the average person in their role?
I feel like there's not one way to make a movie. And I had somebody tell me that it was a cinematographer I was talking to, and they were like, I said, there are plenty of other filmmakers that don't storyboard, don't shot list, all of that. Steve McQueen, Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino does it on the day of. He makes a storyboard on the day of. Steven Spielberg doesn't shot list or storyboard unless he's doing some kind of big sci-fi type of stuff. Wow. There are plenty of filmmakers that do it that way, and I was like, so why don't other filmmakers and there are plenty of filmmakers that do, and they do it successfully. The Coens storyboard everything, Scorsese storyboards everything.
Yeah,
Same
I'm that
thing.
way. I do previs for literally everything.
I have done that too. I have literally prevised entire movies with like actual animation. Camera goes in, moves this way, that way. I've done that. I've storyboarded. I've shot listed. I just find that this works best for me.
It's not jazz. It's a different genre.
Exactly. It's just it's different. It works best for the stories that I tell, and maybe I will have a story that will force me to do it in a different way.
Of course, depending on the circumstances. Right.
But the stories that I'm currently writing and that I'm currently trying to tell,
they work great that way.
Yeah, they work great that way.
You're not shooting Gravity and then doing it like improvisation.
Right. Exactly.
Which makes me wonder: do you think that comedy is a genre that's better suited for improvisation than any of the other genres? Like, obviously improvisation works well for basically any genre, but some it seems to work better. Do you think that, and like the great comedies, like you mentioned Superbad earlier, ones like 40-Year-Old Virgin, there's so much improvisation. Do you think that improvisation is better suited for certain genres?
No. I think improvisation can work in any genre. It just depends on the style of filmmaker that you are.
Okay.
I think actually, oddly enough, more than in any other genre, improvisation holds comedy back.
Really?
Because
Okay.
Comedy, when you improv, normally what they do is they'll set up, however many characters, they'll all have a camera pointed at them, and they'll just riff. Mm-hmm. And that is the opposite of what cinema is. That's just, as Alfred Hitchcock would say, that's photographs of people talking. Mm. There's no visual storytelling in that at all. And then you're just combining those and editing. There's absolutely no visual storytelling at all, which can be funny.
But you get a lot of these run-of-the-mill comedies from that. You have hilarious people.
Exactly.
But that's it. There's
that's what it is. It's hilarious people on screen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not cinema. That's not cinema at all. That's photographs of people talking. And sometimes it works. Sometimes those movies are hilarious, and you always know which movies those are when people are doing that.
But the truly great comedies are ones where it's not just hilarious people on screen.
Right.
There's also the entire filmmaking process is behind it to ensure that
there's
that's what Pixar movies are so good. They are comedies, a lot of them, basically all of them to some degree are comedy. Yeah. Like even the most, like, what's the most dark Pixar movie? It's not that dark, And so they're basically all comedies to some degree or another. Yeah. And so they do, because of the requirement of the medium, have a ton of the filmmaking process of cinema built in to make those things work, to make them better. Yeah. They don't rely on improvisation.
Think of it like that. But you can. That's the thing. You can rely on improvisation, but just don't let it disrupt the visual storytelling. Like
Right,
a good
you need
example,
both.
you need both. A good example of it is The Wolf of Wall Street. Martin Scorsese had them just riffing a lot of the time, but he still had the visual storytelling aspect there
to make that better.
Right.
That's
exactly.
Why it's iconic. Almost a sins past just comedy, and
Exactly.
the best comedies do. Like it's hard to even say like Wes Anderson and Woody Allen and Martin Scorsese are even comedy directors because their movies are so much more than just comedies.
Much more than just comedies.
You know?
Yeah. And then when you take those, or even like a Billy Wilder. Billy Wilder was a master visual storyteller, and his comedies were great. His comedies were amazing. The Apartment is an amazing comedy. 1, 2, 3 is an amazing comedy. The 7 Year Itch is a great comedy. Some Like It Hot is a great comedy, but they're also really great visual films.
Right.
That work without the dialogue.
Right.
There are visual gags that happen. There's funny things that happen with editing, or with the way the camera moves, or with how somebody's positioned in a frame. That those things are important for cinema. That is literally cinema.
Which Edgar Wright is the king of that.
Edgar Wright is the king of that.
Amazing.
Edgar Wright is the modern Renaissance man of that. He is amazing at visual storytelling with his comedies.
Yeah, and he does it to a level that's honestly hard to believe.
Right.
Where you can watch some of his movies like Scott Pilgrim 50 times and you're still catching stuff. Right. I didn't even notice that was in there,
It's great.
So that makes me wonder then, if you had to yourself determine which genre you think you're the best at, do you have even though you might want to do all of them, do you have a genre that you find that you have some unfair advantage at, that you particularly are just really good at for some reason?
Genre blending. I think that is what I'm really good at. I'm really good at being able to make you laugh and cry and gasp and all of that all in the same movie. And somebody that's really, really good at it is Bong Joon-ho. He's really good at genre blending. And I think the Coens are too, actually. Very good at genre blending. But here's the thing with genre blending. Everything has to assist everything else, you know? It has to, if there's a scary moment happening, you can play the audience to feel something scary and then have a jump scare, but it's actually something funny, you know, and that'll make the funny thing even more funny because you played it up as if it were going to be a jump scare.
Right.
Those things, I think for me, I don't tend to write in one genre or style. I tend to take pieces from not every genre, but different genres that work for the story, and combine them to create something new. I feel like that's the best way to go, honestly, because I don't think life is funny or sad or happy. It's not binary. It's all of those things. You can be crying in the morning and laughing in the evening.
Yeah, it's like weather.
Yeah, it's literally like weather.
It was 100 degrees out earlier, and then it started flash flooding.
Exactly.
And then double rainbows started popping out everywhere.
Exactly.
And that's what films ultimately are, an expression of real life in some other way.
Not even just films, stories in general. I think they work better when they touch on a lot of things like that in life. They combine all of these elements that are very common and familiar emotions to us, and they present them in a way that we can understand. Because I've seen somebody go from having a panic attack to having the time of their lives within like a 20-minute period.
Wow.
It's like, and then go back to being sad, and back to, it's like all of these different things are really what makes life so rich, and so humanity so interesting.
If you had to give anyone advice on how to make films that help connect with people, what would be your advice for capturing or making people feel those emotions?
The first is the way I write. I think it's the most expressive way of writing, even though the first draft that you write will be long and it will be very bad. It will be terrible. But it gets out the raw emotion that you're feeling
onto the
page. Whether or not that emotion stays or not is going. It's
up to the editing.
It's up to the editing that you end up doing. But you get all of that raw emotion out, and then it's there, and you comprehend it better. You may have not been able to put it in words before, but You see it in words on the page. And then maybe it's not expressive enough, so you put more, or maybe it's too expressive, you take some away. Maybe it goes down a path that you didn't intend it to. But all of that there is, I think, golden. Getting all of that there is just like amazing. And
That's
then
smart.
2, I said I don't necessarily want things to be technical, but I have learned the technical aspect of filmmaking to nauseam, to the point where it annoys people that I work with. Like I can tell a gaffer, how to light something. Not that I would, because that's their job, and I try not to cross those lines.
But you have enough knowledge about.
I have enough knowledge to be able to do that. I can tell, a cinematographer how a lens is going to make something feel. And the cinematographer may disagree, but I'm like, no, this is how I feel when I'm looking at this lens and this camera move and this person with these colors. This is how it's going to feel. I know exactly how it's going to feel. A composition, I have studied that beyond what most people would ever need to study. Most people that make films would ever need to study, beyond the rule of thirds, beyond the golden ratio, beyond all of that. I have studied, all different types of compositional techniques. I've learned, like we talked about it, I learned camera lenses from reading, big ass textbooks about camera lenses that break them down inside and out. You
guys got to see this book.
He's seen the textbook.
So ridiculous. I think a kind of person who would read that like on their free time is gonna be good at the thing. Trust me.
So I learned all of these things
that help you elicit the
emotion. Or if I'm working with film, like actual celluloid, I know how overexposing it will look. I know how underexposing it will look. I know how it'll look, how soft it is, and how it'll feel. Versus shooting on digital, I know how sharp it is, and how different sensors will give you different images, and different image sizes have different emotions to it. How a large format camera will give you more field of view, more of an angle of view than a 35 Super 35 camera, because you have more space on the negative, or more space on the sensor, but it'll also give you more magnification, so it'll bring you closer to the subject while still being able to see more, and that feels different than having a wide lens up close to somebody.
Like Emmanuel Lubezki.
Right,
it feels totally different.
It feels completely different. Same thing with like an anamorphic, which has a very similar effect as a large format camera. You get that magnification with that wider field of view. It's different. It feels different.
You can get the JJ or the Spielberg or the Michael Bay looks.
Right, exactly. And I know these things, so I'm able to use these things to my advantage. So I like learning the technical, learning how to express yourself emotionally, just get it out is always the first step. But then learning how to communicate that emotion in a visual way, that's filmmaking.
See, that's beautiful.
And that you need to know the technical in order to do that.
Right. It empowers you to do what you're trying to do. So it makes me wonder, when you were talking about...
I need to know it. Other people do it differently. I need to know the technical in order to do it.
It obviously is going to help, because one of the things that you didn't quite touch on is, yes, while if you know all the cinematography, if you have a cinematographer, maybe they might disagree with something, but you also can help more because you now can speak the same language of them, which if you didn't know cinematography, maybe you would have a language barrier, which creates a whole different problem that's now solved.
Yeah, there's a difference between saying, I want this lighting moody, and saying, I need this light, at a 4:1 ratio in order to feel the darkness of X, Y, and Z in the character, and then feel I need it to be a 50-50 lighting, split lighting to show the split personality or the split soul or whatever. There's a difference. Like if anytime somebody comes to me with an idea on set, I always say, well, what does that have to do with the story?
Yeah, right.
Like if it doesn't have anything to do with the story, then don't bring the idea to me.
Right. Which makes me wonder, since it's up to you because you're the director in that instance, right? So the question is, if you have a cinematographer and you're the director, there's a quote by Alfred Hitchcock, which is that in filmmaking, the director is God. In documentary filmmaking, God is the director, right? And so because we talked about this before, how do you feel like the roles between a director and cinematographer specifically are? What do you feel like it should be like? What do you feel like the different, that there's one way to do it, but how do you feel like the roles are actually aligned?
It depends on the film and it depends on the director.
Of course.
It is way more important, cinematographers, I'm sorry to tell you, it is way more important for you to adapt to the working style of the director than for them to adapt to you. If you don't like the way they work, don't work with them.
Yeah, I said the same thing.
If you don't like the way they work, don't work with them. But at the end of the day, the person that has the most influence over the outcome of the film is usually the director. You know, that's just the way it works.
At least in movies.
In movies specifically, television shows, it's probably the showrunner, you know, and you know, sometimes it could be a producer. So I'm actually working on a YouTube video right now about the auteur theory, and the auteur, not all directors are auteurs, and not only directors can be auteurs, producers can be auteurs. I feel like George Lucas is an example of that for the last two of the original Star Wars films. He didn't technically direct it, but come on, George Lucas, his influence was everything on those films. You know?
His stamp is all over it. It's
exactly.
basically his vision via
somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it can a lot of different people. Tom Cruise, I think, is the driving force behind the Mission Impossible movies.
No doubt about it.
You know, he's the actor on screen. He's also a producer, but he's the actor on screen. You know, so I feel like if you have a strong director who has a strong visual sense, then let them go. Let them do what they do. That being said, in most cases, directors should not be telling the cinematographer how to light. You should be able to express the mood of the lighting that you want beforehand and set those parameters for the cinematographer.
To apply their own creativity.
Exactly. If you guys establish that we're using naturalistic soft light, let them do it. Let them figure out what that means.
Kill it, because that has their whole attention.
Right.
Well, you as a director should have your attention across the entire thing.
Exactly.
So if you get someone good you're working with, you're probably going to want to give them you don't need to micromanage to such a degree.
Exactly.
And honestly, a lot of the time, the person, if you're smart, you're going to hire people. Steve Jobs has a quote: "We don't hire people to tell them what to do. We hire people so they can tell us what to do."
Right.
So if you're working with people, if you're putting a team together, you want to put people together who they're going to tell you things you didn't even know.
Right.
Even if you're good at that thing.
Right. Yeah.
know?
And you know, that's why it's great to collaborate as a filmmaker. You know, but there are cinematographers that get upset when a director will, you know, choose a camera lens, and directors want to compose their own images, and there are many directors that do it both ways. Many successful directors that do it both ways.
Because there's no one way to make a
no
film,
one
like
way
you
to,
said earlier.
Yeah, Todd Phillips directed the Joker films, or the Joker film. That second one hasn't come out yet, and the Hangover movies. He works with Lawrence Sher, who was the first guest on this podcast. What up, Lawrence? Todd Phillips doesn't do that. He's not the strong visual sense. He knows what he likes. He gets what he likes.
He cares more about performances and the actors, and he trusts Lawrence enough to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And that create, really works
to
out.
Frame the image, to pick the lens, to do all of that. That doesn't mean if you do pick your own lenses and compose your own shots and set up where the camera is, that doesn't mean you're not focused on performances.
Exactly, because David Fincher could probably do every job
Fincher,
on a movie.
David Fincher is a good example of that. A great example of that, and I brought this up in my Lawrence Sher interview. But Scorsese, according to Robert Richardson, who is one of the most iconic cinematographers ever, Robert Richardson says Scorsese is not at all collaborative when it comes to camera work. He picks his lenses, he chooses the camera movement, how it's going to move, where the camera is going to start, where it's going to end, the composition of the image, and you know that's that. But Scorsese is known for being very actor and performance focused. You know?
So you can do both,
or a combination. It's a spectrum. It's
and they could all work to the highest level.
Right.
It's really about what works best
right.
for
The
you.
Coens are somewhere in between that. They storyboard everything, but then you know they allow Roger Deakins or whoever they're working with, Bruno, to come through and you know put their own spin on the images that they've already created beforehand.
And it shows.
And it shows. You know, but it still looks like a Coen Brothers film because they have a certain way of setting up camera movement, a certain way of framing, a certain way of doing all of those things.
How did you get to where you are now with the stuff even outside of the Film Crux podcast and outside of social media?
I connect with other artists too because even stronger way to get grants and make money and stuff like that is to connect with other artists, like other type of artists, not just filmmakers, photographers, painters, musicians, there's entire communities of artists, and then you can use your talent to help them elevate what they're doing, and they can help elevate you, and then they can put you on to different types of, like I said, grants and fellowships and stuff that'll get you money that'll help you fund what you're doing and all of these other things.
So symbiotic still.
Symbiotic. That's all it is. You still have to be symbiotic,
That's brilliant. Okay, so one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is, what is the biggest lesson that you feel like you've learned through filmmaking? That you're like, man, if DiAnte had to travel back in time to 20-year-old DiAnte and be like, man, next time you're shooting, think about this.
It's all of it, man.
You got 30 seconds with old DiAnte.
Learn composition, learn editing, learn camera movement, learn all of the things. So it would be
research.
Yeah, it would be like it's literally just go while you have time, because once you get older, once you get not even more successful, once you start needing more money, you're going to have less and less time to do it. While you can, learn all of the things that you possibly can about filmmaking. Even if you're not a writer, learn how to write, learn story structure, learn how to tell a story with visuals. If you're a writer and you're not, behind the camera, learn all of the things that you possibly can while you have time. Watch as many movies as you can while you have time, because that time will get, as more responsibilities come into your life, that time will, be sucked away. And I wish I was more disciplined. I wish I was as disciplined as I am now to learn and do all of those things, because I would have had way more time and way more ability to learn it, and the more the more you're able to execute.
Right. And you talked about going to films for filmmaking. It's like Quentin Tarantino said, I didn't go to film school, I went to film. Yeah. So do you feel like film itself has been your best film school?
Yeah.
As a cinephile?
A combination of trial and error and actually going out and trying to shoot things and, sucking at it and eventually getting better, and then watching movies. That's, watching how other people did it and things that can work. Every film is derivative of another film. Every filmmaker references other filmmakers. It's just impossible not to. It's literally impossible not to.
Right. And I always tell people to watch a film in like 3 ways, right? If they're trying to do filmmaking. The first time, and it's not a rule by any stretch, but I say if you watch it the first time, just watch it as it is. Yeah. Don't do anything. Just enjoy it. Because I think a lot of filmmakers sometimes go right into the breaking down thing and they miss the amazingness of the film. Yep. And there's some things you're not going to not notice. It's like if you skate, I used to be a skateboarder, you start seeing everything on the street as a skate spot. Yeah. There's a natural thing you're going to do. But I say watch the film, just enjoy it. Then the second time, go back in and think of it as breaking it down from a filmmaker's perspective. And then the third time that you go watch it, then figure out what kind of stuff you could take that you can incorporate into your own style. And if you just do that, of course, there's some films you're going to watch 100 times, like I've seen Inception 100 times. You don't have to do that every time. But if you just do it those 3 times, you're going to get so much. It's a really easy way to learn a bunch of lessons from the film that you couldn't get if you just do one of the 3. Or if you just there's some people who only break them down and they're missing the enjoyment part. That's what it's for a lot of the time, You see a lot of people who are analyzing things and they're not understanding the core of what it is. It's like, filmmaking is one of the few art forms that's entertainment also. Right. You don't have to make a film for entertainment, but I'm guessing most of the films that you like are for entertainment. You could have art without entertainment. Yeah. But filmmaking, as a medium is an entertainment medium.
Filmmaking is a spectrum between art and entertainment. Some fall more on the art side, some fall more on the entertainment side, but there's both in every film. Yeah. It's literally, and art in general is entertainment. Art is entertainment.
Art is entertainment.
Cave people painting on walls was to entertain other
themselves
people.
And others. Yeah, exactly. It was pretty boring back then. Yeah, so cave paintings was like IMAX.
That was IMAX. Those were IMAX movies back then.
Look at that bison. I love the contours.
Exactly. Art is entertainment. So there's nothing wrong with entertaining people.
Who are your 3 favorite artists outside of film? I know that's a wild question, but I feel like if you really want to be great at an art, not being limited to one genre or niche or even medium is going to make you better if you ingest stuff from outside of it. So it could be photographers, musicians, could be anything. Like people who just inspire you outside of filmmaking.
That's an interesting question. Jeez.
The only kind I ask.
That's tough. I'm trying to think.
Do you find yourself like a certain record that you're just like, God, it makes you want to do? Because I usually find it when people are trying to figure out who their biggest inspirations it is.
Yeah.
It's like when you've done the thing, you've listened to the song, or you've watched the thing, or you've seen the thing. It makes you want to go do something immediately.
Recently I've been listening to old D'Angelo music.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, and D'Angelo, kind of like Prince, played all of a lot of the instruments on all of his records and everything like that. But there's something about the way that he layers the instruments and he layers his vocals and everything like that. That it's just like you had to put so much thought into it to be able to create this sound. That's
There's more moments of intent, but that's why I feel like animation is so amazing. Like when you watch things like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, there's so much intent in everything because you have to literally make everything,
right,
that it comes through more like, man, they put a lot into this. And I think the moments you have to make your creative choice, the more of those you can make, the more chances you have to find something special. So maybe that's in D'Angelo music, definitely in Prince music, or a lot of those great musicians. They have more of those moments of creative choice.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
So D'Angelo, I would have never thought you would say that, but that's an awesome one.
I'm a fan of Pharrell. Well, I love Pharrell musically. Everybody loves Pharrell musically. Pharrell's one of
probably the greatest producer of all time.
Probably the greatest producer of all time. But I'm a fan of Pharrell when it comes to self-expression and fashion and media. It's all very.
That's so wild.
It's a very beautiful combination of elements to make something that's uniquely him. Outside of the music.
I mean, the parallels are crazy. Like you were talking about the drawing. Pharrell's been my biggest inspiration for forever. It's so weird or maybe it's not weird because Pharrell, at least in black culture, there was this thing when we were kids where black people tried to be both from society externally and internally within black communities very binary about you either have to be this or that. You can't be anything outside of those things. And it was almost like they only showed in categories like, okay, there was only black comedians or black athletes or gangsters. And that's what would all get portrayed on TV.
Right.
And so Pharrell was one of the first people to me that I saw that he's like, okay, he has a rock band. He sings, he does rap. He dresses like how I dress because I lived in California, so he dressed like in skater clothes mixed with hip hop. Like he kind of like brought streetwear to the mainstream, and he like totally did his own thing. It's almost as if he was like an artist so much beyond what the one genre or type of music he did. And I think that he, and then of course Kanye after him and some other people, broke a whole bunch of molds. I guess it shouldn't be surprising that another black kid from my generation would find Pharrell to be so inspirational.
Yeah, I mean at that time it was like Pharrell and Kanye. Those were the ones. They were like everything to us back then, And then a little later on, Rocky, Tyler the Creator,
Childish Gambino.
Childish Gambino, they were just like, you guys are it.
Yeah. They're sort of like finally showing people the different flavors of black people that exist in the mainstream culture that may have not recognized that, like, there have been black punk guys. There have been, like, people don't know how much of rock came from black people, how much of jazz came from black people. The word cool.
Both of those art forms were started by black people.
That's what I'm saying. And it's like the word cool came from black people.
Right.
And a lot of people don't see that stuff. They just see, like, if you were in another country and all you ever saw was of black people was like BET in the 90s or the early 2000s, your idea of what black people are might be extremely limited.
Right. It's like I was watching an Eddie Murphy stand-up thing. I think I was watching Raw. And
one of the greatest stand-ups ever.
Yeah, he was talking about how people from foreign countries come and tell him his jokes, and all they don't understand English very well, so they just say the curses at him. So they'll come up to him and say, "You motherfucker! I see you, motherfucker! You son of a bitch, cocksucker!" So it's like that, if that's all then that's what you're gonna.
It could be even endearing,
right.
But you're gonna not understand like the dimension.
Right, you're gonna think that's the only thing it is, So I respect the Pharrells and the Kanyes and the Childish Gambinos and the Tyler the Creators and the people that really
kicked open all those doors and really showed
changed,
people.
It changed what not only black people were seen as, but black masculinity changed. It was different. We didn't have to be
wearing baggy clothes,
right.
or you could do that stuff or not. And I think people got pigeonholed into this very one-dimensional thing.
Right.
And then now people are saying it's especially interesting for black people, because I tell people that black people in America, black Americans, are one of the only cultures in the entire world who had their culture erased to zero and created their entire culture.
Created a brand new culture.
Yeah, and because almost even the most persecuted people in history have leftover they have culture that's been passed down unbroken in most instances. But black Americans, which is a huge group of people, their culture was literally zero, and it started over. Like, I don't know what my ancestry was or what yours was.
Don't know at all.
Our ancestors could have came from two totally different eras.
Right.
But in America, we're treated as the same cultural group, right? And so we created a culture out of nothing. Like soul food is created out of the leftovers of of scraps that people didn't want. A lot of the music, all the cool culture and fashion was created out of the not having things and making the best of what you have.
Right.
Do you think that the reason that we don't have, because I was noticing this with the Oscars, people were upset because the Oscars weren't picking enough black people, and I felt different about it. I felt like, well, I don't think it's the Oscars not being fair because they're being racist. Think about it, like Alfonso Cuarón and Alejandro Inarritu and like the Hispanic filmmakers are winning like every year, best film and best cinematography and everything. I saw it more as there's just not enough black filmmakers.
I every time black people complain about that, I'm like, well, who would you take out? And 9 times out of 10, they haven't even seen the movies, and it's like, well, how are you saying this movie isn't as good as whatever movie that you're talking about if you haven't even seen it?
Yeah.
But it's not an Oscars thing. It's a Hollywood thing. The Oscars.
Yeah. The Oscars is picking from what they have
available to them. And if the pool of black filmmakers is minuscule, then of course other filmmakers are going to be selected more. It's
the case, because ask people to name 5 black filmmakers.
Right.
Only filmmakers, for the most part, can name 5 black filmmakers.
Yeah.
You go to a regular person and say, "Can you name 5 black filmmakers?"
They'll give you Spike Lee. They'll give you Tyler Perry, and then
it depends how old they are. Yep. They might not give you Spike Lee.
They might not give you Spike Lee, and they'll give you Spike Lee, Tyler Perry, and maybe Ava DuVernay.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, depending on how, like in touch with the culture they are. But
it's not for lack of talent. It's literally for lack of total people in the thing. So how do you think we, like, because we don't have necessarily responsibility unless we take it on, which I would be happy to, but how do you think we get more black people interested in filmmaking? Because that's a thing that I think a lot of people, or just people in general, get more black people interested in filmmaking. Because if they do, it's not like black people don't jump into things like different sports and stuff and do amazing.
Yeah.
How do we get more, like, all of pop culture seems to have a massive influence from black culture. Like, from music, hip hop and R&B and stuff is completely taken over.
Right.
And sports, black people have completely taken over. Filmmaking seems like the last place, filmmaking and maybe politics or something, where black people have not had the same amount of influence as they've had in basically everything else.
It's a matter of seeing more black people doing it, and not just doing it, because unfortunately a lot of black films have also just been trash because they cater to the lowest common denominator in terms of low-hanging entertainment and stuff like that. But then you have great filmmakers like John Singleton, you had Spike Lee, you had now you have Barry Jenkins and
Steve
McQueen is amazing, and you have Ryan Coogler, Ava DuVernay, all these people that are making great movies at a high level, and I think they have already inspired the next generation of black filmmakers. But you have to have not only see black people doing it, but they have to do it well. They have to do the same. They have to have the same kind of dedication to cinema as their white counterparts or their Hispanic counterparts. Or you can't just say, okay, I'm only watching black movies. You have to watch all of these movies. You have to study cinema like you would study any other art form. It doesn't matter that it was majority dominated by white people before then. Beforehand, that's just what it is. They still did a good job at it. So learn what they did and learn how to tell it, how to use the tools that they used in your own way.
Right.
So that we have to have more black people doing it, but we also have to start treating it as a way for black people to find success. Like you said earlier.
Which is hard in filmmaking in general for people to see a path to success.
Right, but it's hard for anything to see a path to success. I think it's harder to become an NBA player than it is to become a successul filmmaker.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. I think it's harder to become a successful, NFL player than,
But more people do the NBA and NFL just because, like you said, the view. You see Michael Jordans and you see NFL players. You don't see as many, especially because, do you think it's because filmmakers tend to be behind the camera that they are maybe not as, because there are filmmakers who are out there.
We know Spike Lee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We always knew who Spike Lee was, but he was the only one at the time. So it's like there's only one of those guys, so there must be only one spot for black people. But on the flip side, we know Tarantino, we know Spielberg, we know Scorsese, we know Fincher, we know Woody Allen,
whether they're extroverted or introverted, or how much they're in the line.
Yes,
but their brands are out there.
Their brands are out there. Scorsese's not out here doing interviews every other weekend. You know what I mean? Like, no filmmaker really is. But but we know who these people are. We know their films. We know who made them. We know what they look like. We know their signatures. All of that. But for some reason, we're not getting that same kind of look as this is a successful filmmaker. Look at this person, and Spike Lee was like, with the exception of like John Singleton, there wasn't really any other, Antoine Fuqua kind of came up in similar areas, but there wasn't really any other black filmmakers at that level that had that level of prestige that was presented as a success story. And then Spike had that big dip in the early to mid 2000s where he couldn't get films made, and the films that he was making weren't getting as much love, so it was like a big,
which was crazy because it's Spike Lee, but
but it was like a big
huge dip.
It was like a big dip,
interest.
For the amount of interest. Like, we weren't seeing anything from black filmmakers until the Ava DuVernays and Ryan Cooglers and Barry Jenkins came.
I tell people I cry during Black Panther. I don't cry during movies, but I feel movies very strongly. But Black Panther, I cried because it's like, people don't realize, a lot of white people in America don't realize that, black people are used to putting themselves in the position of someone else who doesn't seem or look like them at all. And we're so used to it that seeing someone as a superhero on screen, it's not like I didn't know black superheroes. Seeing someone as a superhero on screen who does look like you, who you can relate to, both him and Killmonger, it hit me because it's so strong and so powerful that, maybe if you're white in America, you might just take it for granted. Like, that's why two things are really popular in black culture in America. Anime, right? A lot of black people watch Dragon Ball Z, grew up with stuff like that. And then kung fu movies for even the generation before that. Like, a lot of people's dads who are black loved the kung fu age, and then they might have passed that down to, like, their kids.
Shout out to Wu-Tang.
Exactly. Wu-Tang's a perfect example of that. And I think that's because black people are so used to more easily putting themselves in the position of someone else. If you're white and you grew up in America, there's plenty of heroes with you. You don't have to put yourself in there's a guy from China who doesn't speak or look or talk like me. It became automatic for us to have to do that. That's why anime and kung fu culture took off so much more in black culture. And then to see, Black Panther, and you see all these characters who you can relate to, it just hit me so hard. Like, I never saw anything like that before. And it's beyond just how good the movie is. It just is like amazing to see. People undervalue the importance of that until it happens. That representation is
crazy important to see yourself on screen. You know what I mean? Like,
especially as a good guy,
right?
You know, but as all characters, all the flavors of people.
As a kid, I wanted to be Bugs Bunny. As an adult, I want to be Bugs Bunny. But as a kid, I wanted to be Bugs Bunny. But Bugs Bunny had no ethnicity. You know,
right.
Bugs Bunny.
But black people, they have kind of that superpower,
right?
Because we didn't have a lot of stuff of people who looked like us.
Right.
We could put ourselves in anything, right? You could put yourself in Ash Ketchum's spot in Pokemon, or Bugs Bunny spot, or Goku's spot in Dragon Ball Z, and you related to these characters, and then you could put yourself in the characters of all the white kids. And it wasn't until you started getting like, you would have like one thing like Fresh Prince, where you saw somebody who looked like you, and one thing like this. And it's very rare, but now that we're seeing it so much more, I think that the whole next generation of filmmakers, you're gonna have tons of black filmmakers.
We're gonna have a bunch of we have a bunch of black filmmakers that are coming out now, but we're gonna have a bunch more because I think, like you said, we're seeing it more. We're just seeing the people more, and I think people like Ryan Coogler and Ava DuVernay are doing a great job at creating a personal brand that makes filmmaking look successful.
Even Shonda Rhimes.
Shonda Rhimes,
Shonda
Rhimes for sure. You know, on the television side of things. You know,
you're so right.
Like we're seeing they have built their personal brands to make it seem like, oh, I can be this too. You know what I mean? Like Shonda Rhimes has the longest running not the longest, but the longest running hospital-based
like show
ever,
which is crazy because there's like 1,000 of those things. Yeah,
exactly. She has the longest running ever.
And then Bridgerton's crazy. Bridgerton,
you know,
all her stuff.
All her stuff goes crazy. The one with Kerry Washington.
Is it Scandal?
Yeah. I never watched it, but Scandal.
Yeah. I don't think we're the target audience, but But I heard it's good.
I heard it's good. I never saw it, but you know, Issa Rae is another one.
Issa Rae's a boss.
A great job.
She did the new season of Project Greenlight.
She did. I think she's a part of it now. I think.
Yeah.
But it's like these people are building brands that, you know, black people don't just want to be athletes and musicians or even actors anymore. They're like, wait, I want to create my own content. I can make a movie. I can make a television show. I can do, you know, all of these things. So like, I think
production companies, even studios. So maybe that's maybe Film Crux.
Even Tyler Perry, as much flack as he gets for his filmmaking and for all of that, he's showing that you can be successful. He owns the biggest studio on the East Coast. Like
that's
all
insane.
of the Marvel's movies shoot at his at his studio. All of the
that's crazy.
He said that he can't even get a new studio to make movies because it's booked up for so much. So like it's
I have
crazy.
so much respect for him as a business person.
As a business
I don't
person,
watch any Tyler Perry movies.
Yeah,
I've seen some of them, but
as a business person,
he's
and
an actor. He's an amazing actor, by the way.
He is actually a pretty good actor.
Like Gone Girl and Star Trek.
When he's outside of his own movies, like has his doesn't have to worry about all that other stuff. He's actually a really good actor.
Like, why is he so good?
Yeah, you watch me, you're like, wait a minute, why aren't you doing this more? Like,
I know. It's like he could easily be one of. That just shows you how good and talented he is. He could easily be one of the best actors on earth.
Right.
And he's just so successful at everything else. He doesn't have to be, I guess.
Yeah. So it's coming. It's just it's just a long time coming, and it's gonna be a slow thing until it's not.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it was only 5 black players in the NBA, and then it wasn't.
We know what happened now. Well, okay, this is my last question for you, right? My last question for you. Someone makes a biopic about DiAnté Jenkins. Now, you don't know the ending of the movie or anything because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
But someone makes a biopic about your life. The credits roll. You have a quote at the end of the credits. What would your quote be?
Get money and don't love these hoes.
And that's a wrap.
Here at Film Crux, we're known for helping filmmakers take their films and videos to the next level, which is why we're proud to announce Film Crux Plus. Every Film Crux product for just $10 a month. Sound design, Foley, cinematic music, VFX assets, and more, all in one place. Your films will never be the same.